Young people, this is our takeover. It is a quiet coup d'etat we are going to effect here, but it's all for the greater good. It's an incredible honor to have been asked to deliver this keynote, reimagining us the role of popular music in self-actualization. For almost a century, Ghana's musical landscape has been built on a robust foundation laid by Dr. Ephraim Amu. I could not fathom the depth of this foundation until I did the intensive research necessary to deliver this keynote. I mean, intensive, not making rap songs intensive, way more. I'd like to thank Professor Techiwa Menu, Professor Kofi Anyido, and the Academy for giving the opportunity for a younger voice outside of the halls of academia to share a critical perspective of an artistic creator, a perspective different from that of cultural critics and scholars. For over a decade, I've been a practitioner in the popular music space, or rap, and culture many in the academy might not readily understand. My knowledge of the popular music space has been in part through bending and inventing rules through this art form, and through the privilege of countless free lessons from my grandfather, Professor J.H. Kwabena-Nketia, naturally. The Academy's invitation came in time for me to engage him on a few occasions before he passed. My only regret was not heeding his caution when he said this to me: "When is the date for the lecture? Hurry up and do it before I leave." I delivered this keynote in honor of Dr. Ephraim Amu, enveloped in the knowledge and spirit of my grandfather, Professor J.H. Nketia. To stand before you, not just as M.anifest, as the youngest and the first. Youngest? Confirmed? We like accolades in my generation, so. To stand before you as the youngest and the first outside of academia, to be tasked with giving the Ephraim Amu Memorial Lecture is an honor I do not take lightly. I'm many years removed from my days studying economics as a college student, and with no doctorate or PhD to my name, no published academic writings, not even sitting in a class of dondology, I am presumably wholly unqualified to be engaging in this sort of academic exercise. Yet, I strongly believe there's value in fortifying the relationship between academia and the outside world. And I do believe it was reiterated just before I came. I'm further emboldened by Professor Kofi Anyido, who led me onto a rarely spoken truth. The truth that most of Dr. Amu's seminal compositions, such as Yenara Assassini and Bonre Kente, were created in his 20s and 30s. There's clearly power in the youthful mind. So I'll begin with the first verse, an interrogation of popular music, self-actualization, and the Amu approach. How do we reimagine who we are? In this keynote, I address the importance of popular music and how we see and express ourselves. Additionally, I speak to self-actualization as an important factor in this conversation. How does African popular music, and by extension, popular music culture, play a role in our ability to achieve our potential as individuals and in turn as a collective? I analyze how factors such as technology allow for new heights of immediacy and resonance for popular music. There is a bridge between the influence of popular music and the theory in psychology known as self-actualization. I know, I'm using Bofakesi for my younger ones here, but by the end it all makes sense. There's a bridge between the influence of popular music and the theory in psychology known as self-actualization. I support my analysis with anecdotes from the last few decades, as well as the connection between Ephraim Amu and popular music. How did his radical pre-independence approach to composition, triggered by an interrogation of popular music, spark a cultural revolution with profound implications on the African identity and psyche? And what can we learn from this as Ghanaians of today? My focus on popular music and not traditional music or art music is based on its overwhelming relevance to the youth, in particular to the millennials, the generation born between 1980 and 2000. If you're a millennial, say aye. Wonderful. I am not alone. Popular music is one of the most significant influences in shaping the thinking and behavior of young people. In Christina Williams' 2001 research piece titled, "Does It Really Matter? Young People and Popular Music?" she says, quote, "It is important that people's own accounts of their lives are taken seriously." She continues on to say, "I feel like it's only respectful to ask people about their engagements with popular culture rather than simply making assumptions or developing theories without contacting the people being discussed." Hence why I'm here. I would argue that the world is not divided into fans and non-fans, but rather that people engage with music in different ways at different times. End quote. On the matter of self-actualization, I use the hierarchy of needs framework proposed by the psychologist Abraham Maslow, a 5-tier pyramid model of human needs. So from bottom to top, the 5-tier model of the hierarchy of human needs consists of, the first one is biological and physiological needs. The second one is safety needs, shelter, security, order, all of that good stuff. The third one is love and belonging needs. If you've been in love, you know that level. The fourth one is esteem needs, esteem for oneself and respect from others. And the fifth one, which is what is of concern to this keynote, is self-actualization. So self-actualization, for all intents and purposes of this keynote, is realizing your potential through creativity and a mental and spiritual awakening. The cultivation of popular music in an indigenized fashion by contemporary musicians on the continent and in the diaspora is shifting the gaze of aspiration of African millennials from a Western prism to an African one. I seek to further the conversation on the importance of popular music in the self-actualization agenda, to center popular music with intention and outline the social cultural power that comes with the music. Verse 2, the Yam Ponsa provocation, popular music influence on the Amu approach. I begin with the incessant critique directed at Amu during his time as a teacher and catechist in training at the Kupon Presbyterian College in the 1920s and early 1930s. Quote, "Teacher Amu, why are you now teaching vulgar songs like Yam Ponsa at the seminary?" Unquote. End quote, sorry. In the eyes of his Christian colleagues, adopting the wildly popular Yam Ponsa dance tune was sacrilegious. Even though Amu wrote entirely new and sanitized lyrics to the Yam Ponsa melody, members of the church and some of his colleagues at the training college remained opposed and could not be placated. According to one of his biographers, Fred Ajiman, they were concerned Amu was contaminating the minds and souls of the students with his pagan songs. Very heavy accusation. Yet Amu's interrogation of Yam Ponsa was one of the pivotal points in his approach towards compositions. In a 1993 conversation with Professor Kofi Agawu, Dr. Amu tells a fascinating story about what I refer to as the Yam Ponsa provocation and its lasting influence on him. Quote, "Well, you see, before I started writing in our idiom, there's a popular dance tune in Ghana called Yam Ponsa. Now, there used to be a journal produced at Achimota during those days. And one Mr. Ward, a historian but also a musician, wrote something in that journal about Gold Coast songs and quoted this as an example. And the principal of the training college at the Kupon read about this." Dr. Amu goes on to describe the curiosity of Reverend Ferguson, the principal. He says, "What is this tune, Yam Ponsa? I want to hear the students sing it. So I asked the students to sing it. Of course it is a dance tune, we had all heard it, and we all knew it, and they sang it." He concludes by elaborating on the personal influence of Yam Ponsa on him. Quote, "When I went home that day, I said, but I ought to produce this in actual writing. I must write down the notation. Later, when I learned drumming, I found that this technique of combining triple effect with double effect was there too. And that made me come upon what I now describe as a basic African rhythm. So that's how I got rhythm." End quote. It was a radical act for Dr. Amu to accept and adopt Yam Ponsa. Furthermore, it was a fascinating feat reconciling Yam Ponsa's adoption with his staunch Christian beliefs and the Eurocentric academic conception of music which prevailed at the time. This was the 1920s, after all, when African music elements were inherently considered pagan in basic or inferior. Popular music then and now share a common bond. It is not the preserve of those formerly trained in music or composition, unlike art music or classical music. One difference, however, is that in those earlier decades of the 20th century, popular music was made to belong to the public domain as part of folklore. Professor John Collins details how Yamponsa was associated with different creators. The first instance is in 1918 by a group of Ghanaian cocoa brokers who were working in a town of Apija, who are Akan in southern Ghana. The second instance was in 1924 as it was held in Kibi. And the third instance, Professor Collins recounts, is in 1928 in the form of a recording by Kwame Asari, also known as Jacob Sam. So Yamponsa was of the Gold Coast, readily understood, linguistically relatable, with a primal allure, as is often the case with popular music motifs. Dr. Amu continued on to research traditional music and drumming in depth and incorporate that and his understanding of the motif used in Yamponsa to create an African idiom to guide his compositions. Self-acceptance and authenticity are both important requirements for self-actualization. Popular music voices the stories of who we are and what we go through. Popular music, it validates us and allows us to be authentic selves. I, for one, could never have found validation in being a rapper, were it not for my iconic predecessors such as Reggie Rockstone, Obrafour, and Comfort Kwade, who were able to make music with style and content centered on the Ghanaian experience. No amount of time I spent listening to Nas, Jay-Z, or those people could have brought me that validation to be my authentic self. Because the stories they told, no matter how relatable in a human sense, were not Ghanaian stories. I could not always easily see myself in them. As opposed to, yesterday was the 20th anniversary of the most classic hip-hop album in Ghana called Pamuka. And as opposed to when I first heard this, let's remind ourselves. Is this familiar? And when I heard something like this, there was something about it that felt Ghanaian. And Obrafour rapped incredibly with proverbs and etc. And 20 years later, I'm going to do my live remix right now. Can I do that? I painted the skies red until the raindrops bled. Now heaven whispers words I never said. Born and bred on Banku and bread. Take a leap of faith and watch my wings spread. Bachelor's pad, empty pizza boxes. Count my blessings, discount my losses. Monkey off my back, I hold my horses. My heart rate's higher than the rate of divorces. Nauseous by the parking meter. It's out of order. Thieving my cortex. Day for Yankee like I be villager. Big man, them they treat me like teenager. The pressure, each chow pan, a day like police and thief, pam. Now I go host, I be just Johnny, just come for make dough before me and wifey drop down. But wifey no longer around, so I holla $4 and pounds, CDs and Naira, Francophone francs. If money talks, what does it cost to be frank? I don't need speed meter. I need vision, Mr. 2020, Charlie. Problems, chow chomp, plenty. My mommy say, make her pray, just maybe. Now everybody one logo line. Papa dogo eat the cocoa man of all kind. Chingalinga above 2 women with behind. Thank you. This is what we call a cheat code. Verse 3. So modern day popular music dominance. In the last few decades, there has been a proliferation of popular music in Ghana, and is arguably having its most dominant cultural moment in a century. Technology has become an equalizer and significantly lowered the barriers of entry for creators. With a laptop and an inexpensive microphone in a tiny bedroom, a body of work can be created by any individual with internet data, a modicum of talent, and the patience for YouTube tutorials. Equally as important is technology's revolution in the dissemination and the consumption of popular music. Smartphones, the internet, social media, a plethora of free-to-air digital television and radio stations have made consumption of music immediate, easier, and less costly than it was before. Vinyl records, cassette tapes, CDs, record stores are all redundant and relics of what seems like an ancient past. I'm sorry if I'm crushing your dreams if you own a lot of these. The change in the modes of dissemination from physical to digital have also given rise to the consumption and promotion of current popular music from Ghana and Africa by diaspora youth. By diaspora youth, i.e. immigrants living abroad, first generation Europeans and Americans who are of African descent. So now you have fancy things like Ghanaian Londoners, Ivorian Parisians, etc. Popular music is now used as a stimulant in consumer culture, politics, and religion, and therefore the remarkable power it wields is clear. Yes, it is true that historically our customs have had music as an intrinsic component. You have drummers at chieftaincy events and traditional festivals, funeral dirges to tell stories of the dearly departed, and songs for wartime. Today, however, in addition to all this, we now have an increased use of music for commerce, adverts, movies, TV shows, for politics, and for a competitive church industry. We all bear witness to the fact that in these times, not a single election nor product rollout occurs without an appropriation or tailor-made use of trending popular music. Correct or true or false? Viral cultural moments that dominate popular discourse, such as Kwa Kwa Kwa, 2000, are amplified by popular music, while others, such as the infamous One Corner, are created by the music. It is apparent today that popular music is increasingly harnessed for fleeting cosmetic purposes, and rarely ever for top-tier transformation, such as an agenda of self-actualization. Musicians and composers in the popular music ecosystem, aka rappers, create not just out of a visceral need, but for the purposes of business and subsistence. I mean, this is just the reality. Creators mostly seek to pursue music and the cultural influence it wields to cash in. I believe the lack of infrastructure to fairly financially reward Ghanaian musicians for output, popularity, and cultural relevance has made the situation more acute. Systematically, music making is more of a financial grab than towards any kind of concerted societal transformation agenda. I think this is the fourth verse. Evolution of popular music resonance. It can be argued that from the late 1950s through the 1970s, some popular musicians from Ghana left musical footprints in the world that are still unrivaled by modern-day musicians of the hip life and Afrobeats epoch. Osibiza albums charted in many countries globally, while other acts like Ebo Taylor and Pat Thomas have toured extensively in many more lands than younger acts. So to my younger comrades, when some of my peers come and boast and brag about how they've gone out to the world and all the things we've done, we have not actually scratched the surface. Much more has been done before us. They often benefited from the traditional music industry structure of labels and distribution, and sometimes state support, as was the case during the Nkrumah years. However, the marked difference in resonance between now and then is due to the shift in context of information consumption and human interaction. This new era of 24-hour news cycles and social media has arguably increased the resonance of popular music in the everyday lived experience of young people in Ghana. There is currently little to no research supporting this except anecdotally. So maybe this is a challenge for the academics amongst us to indulge in such research, so that in my next one I can have a backing information, no anecdotes. Yeah. Today, young people are more likely to express themselves online through hashtags and memes more than through ancient proverbs. Yeah, the truth is a punchline, true. Yeah. An illustration of this new shift is how the internet is rife with sloganeering culled from content from popular music. Check these ones out. Vibe song, living my best life, boys are brave, YOLO, you only live once, forget you be a, yint you be a, chop my money, I don't care, boys kasa, forget you be a, you play, Omada. In tandem to all this is the rise in celebrity culture and how the tales and relentless news stories about lives of popular musicians are consumed just as much as their music. A Shatawale Stoneboy dispute at an award show will trump all other issues of national importance and be front page of the Daily Graphic and many other serious news outlets. There are television stations solely dedicated to music videos and music news, as well as primetime shows on top radio stations that solely discuss popular music trends, artists, and industry events. This is all new territory to us. The new wave of Afrobeats, hip-hop, and dancehall commanding the popular music space exists in a culture of sorts. Artists have fierce followings and are able to influence throngs of youth with their life views and philosophies, their views on life and their philosophies. The era of the artist existing in an aura of mystique is gone. Every single day, artists interact with fans online, detailing their lives, giving opinions, and directly reaching a staggering number of people individually and collectively. The influence is significant even when it's cosmetic. For instance, one only has to attend the yearly La Même Gang concert in December to see over 1,000 teenagers not there in adulation, but with dyed hair and following the fashion of the group members. Sometimes the influence can also be culture shifting. Personally, I can share my own experience with the infamous God MC Kanta movement in 2016. Which caused major disruption and sparked numerous conversations about content, substance, and why we had normalized Western fashion and inferiorized African fashion. I'm sure Dr. Amu would have been proud of that conversation since he lost his job partly because of how he wanted to dress. Anecdotally, I have met many young people whose life views have been shaped or shaken by these popular music occurrences that have an impact on the culture they identify and live within. For instance, I once received a heartfelt letter from a young man. By heartfelt letter, I mean a message via Instagram DM. Since in this age we don't write letters the old way, unless of course for visa applications and for a job. In the letter, the young man thanked me for making music that helped him make it through secondary school bullying. I was floored by how my ability to make difference cool in the Ghanaian context was solace enough for the young man to make it through a trying time in secondary school years. But it was also quite instructive. We are now in a completely transformed era of consumer choice, and content is led and fed by the free market. An 18-year-old in Ghana can opt for entertainment channels for the entirety of their waking hours. Popular music and popular music culture is at the fore of most of this entertainment. So, the next verse, potential for self-actualization, the reimagining process. In order to self-actualize, one needs to be self-aware and have a sense of self-regard. Popular music has the ability to normalize, problematize, and or amplify prevailing ideas about identity that are consequential to the aforementioned. An example of this: in a society burdened with the vestiges of colonial impositions on identity, you will notice that in Ghanaian popular music for many decades, we've normalized a colorism trope, mibroni, an affectionate term for my darling, that elevates a fairer or maybe a foreign skin color. Even the Bibini Brony iteration of the trope to address a dark-skinned lover contains the same loaded colorist insinuation that arguably contributes to the skin bleaching economy. If the music I love and sing along to tells me it's okay, why would I think any different? In the role of being able to problematize, the 2007 Hip Life example of Miss Bell's 16 Years song is a good case study. You know that song? Abby. Okay, wonderful. 16 Years explicitly rejects the prevalent occurrence of older men being sexually involved with underage girls, as well as giving linguistic urgency to young girls to rebuff and report the advances of such sexual predators. In a nation still plagued with, I think as high as over 20% of girls in child marriages, the importance of such pointed critiques and songs which receive massive airplay cannot be ignored. Interesting enough, it still remains Miss Bell's most popular song, right? So those who say substance doesn't sell, I mean, that's a lie in there. The progressive effects on self-regard of our popular music is not always as a result of content, but sometimes because of the form. By this I mean musical styles that center African music idioms in its creation have an undercurrent of validation for our style of expression. Pioneering hip life figure Reggie Rockstone, his name is coming up quite a bit today, told me a fascinating story about the creation and reception of arguably his biggest hit, featuring KK Fusu. Do you know that one? Reggie? Wow, okay. So he told me a fascinating story about the creation and reception of this, which now I'm not going to say arguably his biggest hit. His biggest hit, you've confirmed it. The story is instructive in regards to this assertion about the importance of form. So this is the story Reggie tells me. So Reggie's younger comrade, Mensa, a 19-year-old musical prodigy, created the beat for centered on the familiar high-life guitar melody and drum pattern. Reggie recalls being immediately disinterested in the composition. For him, it was just too slow and too much of a departure from the tree raps over hip-hop centered beats that rose him to prominence. Mensa, believing this was a game-changing move for Reggie in really reaching the masses in a more profound way, pleaded his case to no avail. He begged him, nothing. All bets were off. Reggie left the studio. He returned to hear a magical chorus with a vintage high-life swagger from a then unknown KK Fusu, who Reggie had paid absolutely no attention to in the studio before he left. A mundane story of infidelity and heartbreak was felt across the nation, even winning him a Continental Choral Award as well. It was the canvas and the form used that resonated. Reggie's has an interesting historical parallel with the impetus for some of Dr. Amu's earliest compositions, such as Onipa Daonso, Man, Be on Your Guard, or if it was today, it would be in Pidgin, Man, You For Day Guard. Dr. Amu once recounted to the BBC, quote, As a preacher, whenever conducting services, I found that when the hymn was announced and we were singing, you could see that only the literate were singing. The illiterate were not singing, not because they hadn't heard any voice. They heard the voice, but the singing was strange to them. So I felt that they were being denied something. I felt that our hymns should be written in our way of singing.